Hey everybody, it's GauntletX back again, talking about more Guilds of Ravnica spoilers. This is day 2 of full spoiler season, and we'll start right off with Runaway Steamkin. It is 1 and a red for a 1/1 elemental. Whenever you cast a red spell, if Runaway Steamkin has fewer than 3 +1/+1 counters on it, put a +1/+1 counter on Runaway Steamkin. You can remove 3 +1/+1 counters from it to add 3 red to your mana pool. This is definitely a very interesting card. For constructed formats, it's very, very much a combo-y, stormy card, so it's either going to be very hit or miss. Could be great, could be terrible. I am really not confident in saying. The main thing that makes me think it's not going to be great for like a modern Storm deck is that we have Goblin Electromancer, which is just going to give you basically 1 mana for any spell you cast, not just red spells. But this could be interesting in a burn deck, dropping this guy out on turn 2, dropping a few lightning bolts to make it bigger, makes it a decent body. I don't know, it seems like a lot of investment to make it a strong creature. It seems like a lot of things have to go right. It's kind of Magical Christmas Landy to me, so not too certain about its constructed viability. For limited, I think it'll be a middle pick, middle to late. This is only really good if your primary color in limited is red, and even then, it's probably going to be swinging for 2 on turn 3, because you'll play 1 more red spell, and then swinging for 3 on turn 4, which is not that exciting. The only thing really exciting about it is that eventually you will have paid only 2 mana to have a 4/4, which, you know, that's an exciting rate, but it does take time to set it up in limited. Next up, we have Ionize, 1 a blue and red for an instant counter target spell. Ionize deals 2 damage to that spell's controller. This is a very crisp, clean, simple card. It's definitely cool that it exists, and it just feels like one of those cards that's been in the game forever, even though it just showed up. So yeah, definitely very good for like intro decks and showing to new players and stuff. It's such a crisp and elegant card. However, it's not particularly powerful. Dealing 2 damage to someone in a deck that's a control deck, like a deck that uses counterspells, isn't really going to matter that much. Control decks usually win by preventing your opponent from playing anything and then dropping out some kind of consistent threat to get them over time. That 2 extra damage isn't really going to do anything. So I don't think that this is really a constructed card. For limited though, it's also not particularly exciting. It's basically a council that does 2 damage to them, so probably a mid to late pick, especially because it's a gold card. You don't want to pick gold cards too early until you know what your colors are going to be. And this is certainly not a rare that will lead you into being Izzet or anything. But overall, I do like the card. It's a really nice design. It's just not particularly powerful. Next up, we have a Deafening Clarion. 1 a red and a white for a sorcery. Choose 1 or both. Deafening Clarion deals 3 damage to each creature and or creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. These are 2 very strange abilities to put together. I feel like the kind of deck that wants to give all their creatures lifelink is the kind of deck that's going to be having a lot of smaller creatures, maybe like a token deck or just a really fast aggressive deck, and that's not the kind of deck that's going to want to do 3 to each creature, because that'll probably kill all your dudes. So definitely a really strange combination of abilities. The flavor text does try to justify it. Commander, what's the signal to attack? You'll know. It's when all the creatures take 3 damage. So yeah, it's really strange. Certainly could be good in a Jeskai control type deck in standard. It's kind of like an Anger of the Gods. For limited, it'll definitely be a good pick. Always with these kinds of mini wrath effects, you can just sandbag your creatures in your hand for a little while so that your opponent plays maybe 2 or 3 creatures, so you can 2 or 3 for 1 them with this, and that's usually a nice situation. Next up, we have Goblin Cratermaker. It is 1 and a red for a 2/2 Goblin Warrior. You can pay 1 mana and sacrifice it to deal 2 damage to target creature or destroy target colorless non-land permanent. So as everyone has been saying, this is just another card Wizards has printed that can destroy Karns, which is adorable. I don't think that really matters. I don't think this card's going to be seeing a lot of play in Standard or Modern. I don't think that Goblins is going to be a strong enough archetype in either of those formats to really make it worth it. And if you're not getting Tribal Synergy off this card, it's just okay. So yeah, definitely going to be fun and a good sideboard card in Goblin decks in Modern and Standard, but I still think that those decks aren't going to be tier 1 or anything. They'll just be, you can play them if you want to play them, and maybe you'll win sometimes. So yeah, it's nice to have those sideboard options. As far as for Limited, I think this card is a mid to high pick. I wouldn't pick it like within the first 3, but once I'm relatively sure what my colors are, it's a 2-mana 2/2, which is fine, and it can just consistently threaten to kill any of their 2 toughness creatures, or if you attack in with another creature and leave this guy back, you could end up trading 2 of your little guys for like a really important threat. So yeah, it's definitely a decent card in Limited. Next up, we have Chemist's Insight. It's 3 and a blue for an instant that says draw 2 cards, and it also has Jumpstart. So this is Inspiration with Jumpstart. I think this card's very good. We saw Glimmer of Genius seeing a lot of play in Standard. That's probably the most comparable card that saw Standard play to Chemist's Insight. So the big difference is that this doesn't let you scry 2, but this does let you cast it again later, which I think is a fair trade-off. I think this is going to be just as good, not better or worse. It's just different. As far as Limited goes, this is definitely going to be great, in my opinion, in any deck that can play a lot of cards at instant speed. If you're a deck with a lot of counterspells, a lot of instant speed removal, instant speed draw spells are always great. This isn't going to be great in every deck, just particularly it won't be good in decks where you're always dropping a creature during your turn, decks that play consistently at sorcery speed, because then you're just never going to have time to cast this. But I think in the decks that it is good in, it will be awesome. Next card we have is Artful Takedown. It's 2, a blue and a black for an instant. Choose one or both. Tap target creature, and or target creature gets -2/-4 until end of turn. This card is incredible. I couldn't believe this was common when it got spoiled. I am the happiest Dimir player in the world right now because, as I've said before, I keep expecting a bad Dimir card to get spoiled, but every single one so far is at least good and Limited, and this one is phenomenal in my opinion, especially for a common. So on the defensive, when you get to turn 4, this stops 2 creatures from hitting you. You tap one of them down and you kill another one that has 4 or less toughness. That's awesome. I think you would play this card even if it just gave -2/-4 if it was a little bit cheaper. And then for during your turn when you're on the offensive, it's also great. You stop 2 creatures from blocking. Tap one of them down and kill the other one. I think this card is going to be awesome. I'm definitely going to pick it relatively highly. Not really first pickable. You don't want to pick gold cards that early, but I'm probably going to be taking this way higher than you should. Probably going to be grabbing these things like 3rd and 4th pick all the time. So next up, we have Nullhide Ferox. It's 2 and 2 green for a 6/6 hexproof, and it states you can't cast non-creature spells, but for 2 mana, any player can make Nullhide Ferox lose all of its abilities until end of turn. Also, if a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard it, you can put it onto the battlefield instead of putting it into your graveyard. This card is a very interesting design, mainly because they found a way to have that 2 mana loses all abilities thing do something very different for you and your opponent. Your opponent's going to want to do that to get rid of its hexproof so they can kill it, and you're going to want to do that if you have your own non-creature spell you want to cast that turn. There's definitely a very interesting trade-off if you have a strong non-creature spell in your hand where you want to pay that, because there is always that possibility that you pay it so that you can play your non-creature spell, and then your opponent's like, oh, thank you for paying the mana. Now that your creature doesn't have hexproof anymore, let me just kill it. So, definitely an interesting card. It's going to make for some mind games and some interesting plays. And the secondary effect of putting it onto the battlefield when it's discarding is not super relevant. It basically just means if there's ever going to be a discard deck in Standard, its matchup versus green-white is going to be horrible if it ends up being great. Because if that deck ends up being good, green-white decks can just sideboard Nullhide Feroxes and a Johnny's Last Stand. Like, I just don't think that you're going to want to be making decks like that discard, because they have some scary threats like this. So yeah, this guy in Standard is going to work best in those kind of decks with Llanowar Elves and Gilt Leaf Lieges, just the green stompy decks that don't have that many non-creature spells anyway. And for limited, obviously a major bomb. 4 mana 6/6, they have to pay 2 extra mana to use their removal spells on it. That's going to be awesome. The only non-creature spells that you really have in your limited decks, especially if you've drafted around this guy, will just be removal spells that you'll be fine with paying extra mana for anyway, and you probably won't even need to cast them if you have a 6/6 hexproof on the board. Anyways, next up we have Beast Whisperer. 2 and 2 green for a 2/3 elf druid. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. This is automatically awesome in every green commander deck ever. The main question is if this is good enough for stuff like Modern Elves. I don't particularly see that happening, but I would like to see people try it out. It is a glimpse of nature on a body, and on an elf body specifically, so who knows, maybe elf decks could use this, because elf decks can produce a shit ton of mana. So we'll have to see when it comes out. I don't think it'll do anything in Standard. It's just too much mana for a 2/3 that's so easily removed. But certainly very exciting for Commander, and for possibly some cute little Modern Elf deck shenanigans. As far as limited, I think that this is a fine pick. I wouldn't first pick this or anything, another kind of middle pick, because if it gets removed, it is just not great. But if they use a removal spell on it, it's still a 1-for-1. That seems fine. It's just that there is the possibility of you being the kind of deck that doesn't really want this, that like by turn 4 you've just already played your other creatures. Maybe you're that aggressive, you just played a 2 mana 2/2, 3 mana 3/2, then you drop this out, you've got no more creatures in your hand, and you're just kind of sitting there like, ooh, I played a 4 mana 2/3. So yeah, definitely a middle tier pick in limited. Definitely want to build your deck around it. Next up, we have some foreign cards. 3 of them are for Dimir, which makes me insanely excited. Let's start off with Whispering Spy. 1 and a black for a vampire rogue. It's a 1/3, and whenever you surveil for the first time each turn, Whispering Spy deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain 1 life. So this is a very slow kind of win con for a surveil Dimir control deck. I think it's pretty good. Those are the kind of decks that you want 2 mana 1/3s in, and this upside I think is a little more relevant than it seems. You don't have to draft around this guy as hard as it feels like, because all of the surveil cards that have been spoiled so far are already really good on their own. Like, you're not going to feel bad about having Deadly Visit in your deck. You're not going to feel bad about having Unexplained Disappearance if you don't have this guy on the board. So I think this guy's actually going to be great. Definitely a good build around, and you don't even have to work that hard to build around it. I will certainly be casting a lot of these in the pre-release and drafts to come. Next up, we have Secrets of the Mausoleum. This is a Golgari card. 1 and a black for an instant with Undergrowth. Search your library for a black card with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Reveal it and add it to your hand. Then shuffle your library. So this card was really exciting until people saw that it only searches for black cards. So I honestly don't know enough about Dredge to know if this will be good in it. I don't even know if they would run like Demonic Tutors. The problem is this only searches for black cards, and I don't think that there's anything you'd want to search for that's just like a black card in Dredge. I don't know. I'm really not knowledgeable enough on that. As for Standard, I think it's just too narrow. Only searching for black cards, and you have to have filled your graveyard a bit, so you're definitely the kind of deck that is already putting in a lot of work to make this do anything in the first place. This is mainly just going to be a cool commander card, just another tutor at instant speed. Definitely for mono black commander decks. I mean, in-aim Death Aspect loves this card. This is just instant speed demonic tutor in a Death Aspect deck. So yeah, very cool for casual decks. I probably would almost never run this in limited. You have to undergrowth a lot for this to really be decent. Probably you have to have at least 3 creatures in your grave by the time you could cast this, and then it's kind of just draw a card. Unless you happen to have a very cheap bomb creature, specifically a low mana cost black creature card that is awesome. Or I guess it doesn't have to be a creature card, it could just be, I don't know, just any awesome low mana cost black bomb in limited. Yeah, I don't think it'll happen too often. It's probably going to go pretty late in draft, so definitely if you want to build around this card, you'll be able to. Next up, we have a Night Veil Sprite, 1 and a blue for a 1/2 flying fairy rogue, and whenever it attacks, surveil 1. This card, once again, if you see its Dimir, that means I love it. It's pretty awesome. It's definitely not as good as just like drawing a card whenever you attack or anything like that, but that would be insane on a 1/2. Just a 1/2 that scries every turn as long as they don't have anything that can block flyers. Seems very good, and it just slowly kills them if they don't have any flyers, just 1 damage every turn. Another card, much like the 1/3, that I will be playing all the time in limited and probably drafting too highly. Next up we have Reign of Notions, the final spoiler for today. Another Dimir card, so I am in love with it. 1 a blue and a black for a sorcery. Surveil 2, draw 2 cards, and Reign of Notions deals 2 damage to you. So this is a Read the Bones, but it's in Dimir now, which means you can put the cards into the graveyard instead of just scrying. So yeah, Read the Bones was always good, and Dimir decks are definitely the kinds of decks that want a Read the Bones type effect. I think this card's going to be great. Another card that could have easily been an uncommon, and I'm very excited that it will be at common. There's just so many good Dimir cards you can pick up at common in this set. I don't know, man. I think my love for Dimir is like, it's insane. Dimir wasn't even my favorite guild before, but like, I'm like 100% certain Dimir's my favorite guild in Guilds of Ravnica now. They never reveal a shitty card. Spoiler alert, tomorrow they're probably going to reveal something really shitty. But yeah, that's all the spoilers today. I'm so happy about Dimir. What do you guys think about the spoilers? Leave a comment below. Let's talk about it. Anyways, I'll see you tomorrow with more Guilds of Ravnica spoilers.